Welcome back to this week's live stream. This is Brian with the Blurting While Dead live stream. Um, I was gone last week and I'm recovering from a broken tooth, which kind of sucks. Um, it was kind of a draining experience. It's weird. The entire broken tooth saga was this really draining experience. And so I decided this week I'm gonna try to avoid political stuff this week. I can get in the weeds, and I know a lot of, uh, that's kind of the direction it normally heads is me going into a bunch of political stuff. I don't want to. I want to talk comic books this week. Um, and specifically, I've been putting it off and putting it off. I want to talk a little bit about X-Men 97, and then I'm probably going to do like a full breakdown and kind of a review. I don't like that word, but to do a review of X-Men 97. Um, but I just want to give my opinions about it. And I want to talk about the larger X-Men universe in Marvel right now. Hold on. Wow, we're coming off the clip. All right, hold on. Hold on a second. The moon landing was faked. I don't believe that one. But I, why? What's wrong with the X-Men? You gotta explain that one to me. Why don't you like the X-Men? I love the characters though. Um, Okay. So why don't you like the X-Men? And while, I kind of want to go into this outline real quick because I want to establish one thing. I actually really did enjoy X-Men 97 before I get into telling you why I was kind of disappointed with it. But I really did enjoy X-Men 97. I enjoyed season 1, I enjoyed season 2. The reality is I think I was feeling season 1 a bit better than season 2, just because I feel like, X-Men 97 is gonna be rushed regardless of how they do these storylines because, a lot of the storylines they're adapting for the cartoon, were multi-issue. Sometimes these things went on almost a year, and so they're trying to adapt a lot of information and get it into, what, 8, 9, 10 episodes. Organization, they just do fuck shit that as human, you really can't support. Yeah, but we're talking about okay, so I'll get into a little bit of the politics of X-Men. So, um, one of the things we talk about a lot of times is, when you have an oppressed group of people, you can't micromanage their response to that oppression. And in Marvel, the cleanest analog of X-Men are the oppressed group. Now you have the Morlocks who are double oppressed because they're mutants who can't fit in with society. And they actually did address that in the Krakoa era. They started talking about it. They never paid it off. And that was a lot of editorial um fuckery. Like they were messing with the editorial of it because they had clearly set it up that the through line for X-Men was the human looking mutants have one standard of living and there's another standard of living for the non-human looking mutants, even on an island that is for mutants. And so they started talking about it and then they never really paid it off. But I saw the direction it was going, but there was some editorial um fuckery that happened in the Krakoa era of X-Men. Um, and there was a disagreement between, was it Bendis? Who was writing that one? I think it was Bendis. Um, and they wanted the Marvel editorial wanted to extend the Krakoa, the actual them being on the island of Krakoa, since it had boosted sales. They almost overstayed the welcome, and the original editorial team had planned to end the Krakoa part of that saga and just focus on the Orcus side and all the other stuff. And Marvel wanted to extend that Krakoa thing indefinitely. And that was the disagreement. And so they changed editorial teams about I would almost say it was a little bit more than quarter way through. Um, and so they like Marvel screwed like editorial came down from above and said, we really want to lean into this Krakoa thing. I love Magic, Jean Grey, Storm, Wolverine. I love the character. Okay. I don't even know what this is. Yeah, we're probably about to do a timeout here. Fried chicken. Yeah, that's yeah. We're not doing this tonight. So anyway, um so they Marvel screwed with some strong premises they were establishing in that Bendis X-Men, and we'll get into that, but they're talking about how even hey, what's going on? Welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Um, so, and this is all second and third hand information I'm getting just from reading articles about how the Bendis X-Men run kind of ended abruptly, and a lot of it had to do with Brian Bendis had them get it. Brian Michael Bendis had the Krakoa part of it end, and then they moved into the next part of the story. Marvel wanted to extend it, and they extended it well past its shelf life, and there was a lot of jumbled ass stuff that came out of that era. See, I loved Krakoa because it allowed the X-Men and allowed mutants to live in this isolation, and they really established their own society. And because really, when you look at it, when you look at the history of X-Men in the comic books, they are under siege no matter what happens. All areas of the world, the entire is them against the entire planet. We forget that one of the things that happened that is in X-Men lore was the Genosha massacre. And even though Cassandra Nova really made that happen, um, that was a kind of a signpost thing for the X-Men. 16 million mutants died in that, bro. And so when they form their own society, it's going to be really about protectionism and um protecting themselves from humanity. Now, with the Krakoa era, there was still this line where they were going to protect humans and protect the world, protect the planet, but it was more of a we're protecting the planet because we live here kind of thing, as opposed to we have to save all these humans that have been trying to kill us for the last. I mean, I know Marvel uses a sliding time scale, so it'll be like the past 15, 20 years. So, um, I liked Krakoa. I liked the time they were on the island. I really wish I would have seen what they had, what Bendis's original plan was, because I feel like it would have been a lot more connected than whatever bullshit they ended it on. Like this video I was watching about Spider-Man being a mutant. So Spider-Man is a mutate. Mutates are they're not born with their powers, they acquire them. But Spider-Man is a frequent ally and collaborator with the X-Men. I like collaborator better than ally because he does come in and he kind of puts it aside and he actually gets in the dirt and helps them out. He's even taught classes when they had the school. He actually taught classes and stuff like that. Um, there's this little weird thing where Storm just doesn't really fuck with him, which is I think was amazing, but she just doesn't like him. But yeah, Spider-Man was teaching classes up there, so he's kind of a collaborator with the X-Men, but he isn't a mutant. Yeah, it's weird. I had to ban somebody already on this weird low key. I thought it was racist, so I just kicked him off of the thing. So, and I haven't read the book in a long time, but the annulment between Storm and Black Panther's wedding, he so let me see. Wakanda always they also had their prejudice against mutants, but it was more there was a different cultural element to it, but it was still prejudice. And Black Panther and Storm's marriage addressed some of it, but there are some Wakandan mutants too. And so Black Panther said they are extended the protection of the as citizens of Wakanda. And that's kind of how he phrased it. But there's some elements to this, and there's some nuances that I know I'm missing just because I haven't read the book in years. I haven't read that specific book where they address that in years. But yeah, they did dress it. See, the thing I like about the X-Men is if it's written right, And if it's written with somebody who actually kind of understands, some of the modalities and how oppression actually works, they can tell a really cohesive story. But if you don't, that's when you get Kitty Pride calling somebody the N word because they said mutie to her, which was crazy. And she's done it multiple times. She's done it multiple times. When that's where you start getting into the tone deaf aspect of it. Because on one hand, we're acknowledging that there is oppression in the Marvel universe. There's sounds to be racial oppression in the Marvel universe. But on the other hand, Kitty Pride is equating the two things, and you can't always do that when you're dealing with systems of oppression because specifically, um, mutants were oppressed, but they also have powers to defend themselves in a lot of different cases. Some don't. Um, Whereas black and indigenous people, um, just because they're black and indigenous doesn't mean that they have powers beyond the regular person. And so while mutants are oppressed, um, some have the physical ability to defend themselves, others do not. It's a weird thing, but when it's written right, when X-Men is written right, with somebody who's actually paying attention and understands this, and they are not trying to be ham-fisted and speak about things they haven't experienced um or just freestyling bullshit, X-Men can work. And that's what this entire live stream is about. Like how I would, because I don't like to criticize comic books and criticize entire teams of writers and creators as much as saying, okay, I see where y'all going with it. This is how I would have spun it. So that's kind of what we're getting into. Um, let's talk X-Men 97. It started out really strong for me. The apocalypse episodes, the episodes where they're traveling or they travel to the future, is Jean and Cyclops, and they meet Nathan, and they actually do meet was it Rachel Summers, their daughter? They don't know it yet, but that's who it is. Spoiler alert, by the way, if you haven't seen X-Men 97, I apologize. But I thought that was put together really well. I thought the entire Apocalypse being Apocalypse and the origin story for Apocalypse, they actually took the time with it and really developed it and showed that he wasn't always this evil destroyer guy. Like he was really built by his environment. In X-Men 97 universe, I mean, Apocalypse was a slave and he was brutalized and beaten and used as a tool, and it shaped the way that he viewed the world. That's where the survival of the fittest thing came from. Was, if you were strong, you survived. If you were weak, you didn't survive. And that's how he rationalized his world and rationalized all the horrific stuff that happened to him. I do like the little twist where the X-Men, specifically Charles and Magneto, were really like they were components in how Apocalypse became Apocalypse. And it really showed how time paradoxes work. Magneto really, like, he was trying his best to make Apocalypse a freedom fighter for mutants and like make him so he's not evil and not trying to destroy the world. Well, he's not really trying to destroy the world. He's trying to destroy the world so he can build a stronger one. That's what his worldview is. But Magneto really tried his best to make Apocalypse kind of this hero. And it was instrumental in turning Insabanur into Apocalypse. And even when they show it in the cartoon, the art actually shows them being present and being instrumental in Apocalypse discovering the celestial ship and getting into it with Immortus and all the stuff. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the level of menace they established with Apocalypse in that story, where he felt like this chaotic force of nature that will always exist. So I'm looking. They do have powers. At the end of the day, doesn't make them invincible, but they're capable to defend themselves against oppression. At least some of them are. Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that adds a layer to it. And so when you're talking about, because there is racial oppression and there is segregation in the Marvel universe. There's racism in the Marvel universe. They've already established that through even stories that you look at, Red, White, and Black, even though if they consider it Elseworld, I don't think so. but the story of the super soldier serum and how they tested it on black soldiers and how it killed some of them and deformed some of them and um, destroyed the minds of some of them. And it was all due to racism. The entire Blue Marvel, why Blue Marvel went into hiding. Initially, he wore a mask, and when he became unmasked, he had to go underground because they basically said the strongest being on the planet can't be a black person, and so he had to step aside. And so there's racism in there's a history of racism, segregation, and stuff in the Marvel universe. And then mutants came around, and people didn't forget about black folks, but they said, okay, we're going to focus on them. And yes, some mutants are able to. A lot of mutants were able, but there's an entire, I think it's gamma or epsilon level mutant. Don't quote me on that one, but I think it's gamma or epsilon level, where they have a physical mutation that is not necessarily great for combat. So, this guy just over here looks like a lizard, and that's what his power. Like he looks like a lizard. He has regular durability of a regular human being. He's just a mutated human who's a lizard, and he has no other powers. And that's what the lowest tier of uh, mutants is in terms of power scaling in the Marvel universe. And there's a lot of them where their powers don't necessarily translate to combat. Some of them figure it out. Doug Ramsey, who I'm going to talk about a little bit later, Cypher. He's one. His mutant ability allows him to understand all languages and communicate in all languages. And the writer, depending on who the writer is, they had a lot of license to play with how that impacted his ability to fight. Some of them said it improved his ability to read body language and respond accordingly. Others said he learned some self-defense stuff through being in the danger room and training with the other X-Men. And others are just like, yeah, Cypher just kind of plays the rear depending on how they do it. But a lot of like the Morlocks, when they had the Morlock Massacre, which was a big, huge arc in X-Men, the Morlock Massacre was all based on the fact that they sent the Marauders down there who were all super-powered mutants, and they slaughtered a bunch of Morlocks on Mr. Sinister's whim because he thought they were useless. And they killed a bunch of mutants who really didn't have the capacity to defend themselves. And the government plays up on that. The entire thing with Krakoa, and you had Orcus who was operating, and I think Orcus was cast off Shield and AIM agents that hated mutants, and they formed their own little crew, their own army, and they would go after mutants, and they were brutal against them. And it was interesting to see that not every single mutant in Marvel has the ability and capacity to defend themselves. Okay, and so that's where we're going to go with it, because it does actually tie in to how, and I'm kind of spoiling my own live stream, but doing a spoiler alert. His ability to speak, to understand and interpret all forms of language actually plays into how Doug Ramsey became the heir of Apocalypse and became Revelation. And it fits into his powers. And they did some interesting things. Unfortunately, Age of Revelations was cheeks, and I don't like insulting people's work. I know Jed McKay worked hard on it. I think there was probably editorial meddling in that one. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. There were some standout moments, but it wasn't really that good. But they played upon Cypher's language ability, and basically said he has the power to, with his words, to basically compel you to do anything. And they had Trevor Fitzroy and a couple of other mutants that I forgot how they put it. They were like the voices of Revelation or whatnot. Basically, they enhanced his power so that he can control multiple people. And one of the things that he would do is babble people, where he would remove their language, which was really an OP and fucked up thing to do. But he could remove their language, and so they could experience the world, they could see the world. They didn't have the language to communicate, and you remove your ability to process to have any kind of language or any kind of communication with people. It was a wild power. With I think with Kitty Pryde, one of the things he did was he basically used his power to force people to compel people to do things that he wants them to do, that they can't, like he gives you an instruction that you have to follow, and basically he made her intangible, and so she ended up becoming the ghost that haunted his castle. It was a wild thing. There were some interesting threads, but overall, Age Revelation wasn't really that great, and it was kind of a bummer. After from the ashes let everybody down. There's other aspects to it. So anyway, long story short, beginning of X-Men 97 started out strong, and it just started dwindling. And I think probably the part where it cut off for me, where I'm like, I'm enjoying it. I'm having a good time watching this, but it's not as good as and cohesive as the first season. I think it was the standalone Wolverine episode. Because they tried to do the Fatal Attractions arc where Magneto yanked the adamantium off of Wolverine's bones. And so for about half an episode, Wolverine had no adamantium on his bones, and he just had his bone claws and stuff. They did like one episode of that, and then he is back at Weapon X, and he's invading Weapon X with Lady Deathstrike, Sabretooth, Maverick, and I forgot who the other dude was, and it didn't matter because they redshirted him anyway. He didn't survive the opening salvo of that episode. It really felt disjointed. And Morph, it really felt disjointed, because why is Sabretooth here? I know that, hey, we're gonna go destroy Weapon X and get some payback. Sabretooth be like, I'll do that on my own. I don't need y'all. Like, him and Wolverine, every time they see each other, they try to kill each other. The idea that they're going to work together again after Sabretooth iced Wolverine, one of Wolverine's, one of his original loves, is crazy to me. And that episode was weird and out of place. It was a fun time. It was basically like, they had the Brood in there, and so basically it was like X-Men meets Alien, and it was interesting and fun to watch. But even the payoff of, okay, Wolverine just tricked everybody, and we're just going to go to Weapon X just so that he can get the adamantium rebonded to a skeleton, which didn't really jibe with how the comic books presented that. And his motivations were all off and weird, to be honest with you. And the way he used Morph, like I could see him using these other people these other people that he's had different issues with throughout his history, but he used Morph, and Morph has always been his number one in the X-Men 97 series, at least. Morph has been his ace, his friend, and he used his friend. It was really weird. And it was like this weird, completely out of character shift for Wolverine. It matched kind of Wolverine in the comic books a little bit, but even then, Wolverine's loyalty to his friends wasn't like that. Like his loyalty to his friends and his fellow soldiers, the way he saw it, wasn't really that shifty. In X-Men 97, it almost established him as this super untrustworthy character. Yeah. And here's the thing, Magneto has been an X-Men. He's been an X-Man for longer than he was a villain. They brought him back. There was a whole thing where he ended up taking over and basically being Professor X to the New Mutants, and was working in Xavier's Academy for a while and training mutants and everything. And so he hasn't been a villain for a long time. And that's how they did it. And I understand, like, they're establishing the menace of Apocalypse in the show, and he looked like a badass in when he atomized. That was cold-blooded what he did to Magneto. It was really entertaining. And I'm like, oh shit, Apocalypse is serious business, bro. And that was pretty much the peak of what he did in that show. That was it, really. Evil Magneto is a Nazi. Well, okay, so that one, I'm gonna push back on that one, because Magneto survived Auschwitz. Magneto is Jewish. He survived concentration camps. He killed Nazis. And that is one consistent thread in the comic books. Dr. Doom doesn't really fuck with Nazis. Magneto does not fuck with Nazis at all. Um, there's a panel, if I can find it, where Magneto caught up to the Red Skull and buried him alive. Like he put a he left him a bottle of water and left him in the bottom of a cellar with no ladder that he couldn't climb out, locked in deep underground in a bunker that he couldn't escape, and said, "Best of luck to you." 1,000, but I'm like being a jerk. No, and see that was that's one character defining trait of him. It's another one that doesn't fuck with Nazis. Was weird was the Joker. They wrote that into his character. I think it was one of the crossover things where Marvel and DC crossed over, and Joker said, "I don't mess." He refused to work a Red Skull because he doesn't like Nazis either, which is weird code of honor for the Joker. But anyway, I think the way that they did it, and they established Apocalypse as this threat, you're like, holy shit. And then they went to another episode, and that was the Wolverine, infiltrating Weapon X and destroying Weapon X and dealing with the Brood. And then we're kind of back to this a little bit. It was weird and disjointed, and I think one of the things that was a letdown this season for me was Joker's anti-fascist in some continuities. Right. He's ultimately a hypocrite. Yeah, Joker, the way they phrase him, the way that they've always said it, the way I've heard it best said actually is Joker has a form of super sanity where he's the one that realizes he's in a comic book. I always like that interpretation of him. But yeah, so anyway, the entire way they ended, they get back to the Apocalypse story, and I'm really going to focus on why I was disappointed. So we do we're going to bring out X-Force, we're going to bring out X-Factor and have them duke it out. We're going to have Polaris come in and kind of replace Magneto. There were some interesting threads and interesting things that they did. Establishing Nightcrawler to do how they did Nightcrawler, but really got you to love his character. It was dope. The biggest problem I had with the season was Apocalypse was established as this menace, like absolute fucking menace. And the way that they ended him, where we never really got a chance to see him again, like in his real form. The way that they had it was they blended a couple of different arcs. I know there's one where Wolverine becomes either war or death, one of Apocalypse's horsemen. And in the comic books, Gambit volunteered to be one of Apocalypse's horsemen for some reason or another. I can't remember exactly. It's been years since I read that one. But you bring back Gambit, and basically Gambit's back for a little bit, but he's also Apocalypse. And he's also the Horseman Death. And basically Apocalypse took over Gambit's body. I felt like there should have been something else with Apocalypse besides Apocalypse takes over Gambit's body, and then we kind of Care Bear stare him out of Apocalypse's body, and through the power of love everything is healed. And yeah, it faltered to me because the level of menace that they established for Apocalypse at the beginning of the series, beginning of the season, where even in the future Apocalypse is ruling the planet on this massive scale. I just feel like they didn't invest enough time in that character. Nightcrawler Kitty Pryde fusion. What is it? There's in one of the Age of Apocalypse spinoffs, Nightcrawler has a daughter, and I do think it might be Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler. I don't quote me on. Oh, it might be Scarlet Witch and Nightcrawler. That might have been it. But their daughter was it Nocturne, whatever. I got to look it up now. Sorry. Daughter. So yeah, Nocturne, and she's with the Exiles, which was a really kind of interesting. Yep, she's with the Exiles. I'll put her on the screen. But yeah, she is the daughter of she's the daughter of Nightcrawler and the Witch, and she has like this fusion of their powers. Let me get an image of her and see if I can find one that's worth putting up on the Summer Jam screen. But yeah, she was dope, and I thought that Gambit could be a mega level. Like there's some things in Gambit's power set that limit his abilities, but on the highest level, when Gambit like he can control kinetic energy and he can control potential energy and turn into kinetic energy, that's a cracked ability. And so they had to put some really hard um limits on what he can and can't do. But when they show him using his full power is crazy. So this is Nightcrawler and Scarlet Witch's daughter from the Exiles. And so she has a combination of both of their powers. And so she has, his night vision, camouflage, and agility. She can generate other dimensional blasts, possess the bodies of others, and read minds and stuff. So she has this weird hybrid mix of their powers. I don't know if she has this teleportation. I'm not sure. I thought she did. I don't know why I thought she did. It's been a while since I've read. Okay, yeah, she can do mind possession, do some of her hex bolts, inherited from Scarlet Witch. She has some telepathy and stuff, and she can project her consciousness into another person's body for 12 hours. So she has some pretty cracked abilities herself. But dope character. I think Gambit, when done right, makes sense. There's some interesting lore with him and the Guild of Thieves and the Guild of Assassins. Um, and they're building on some of the stuff in Gail Simone's X-Men, with them being located in New Orleans. They did some really interesting stuff with the lore of New Orleans, and I think it was really interesting. And it does give backstory to Gambit, and establishes who he was and what the different guilds represented. They did play around with it in the 90s with X-Men, with the X-Men comic books too. Be so cool, the shadow teleports and you pop back in. Yeah, that would be dope. So I think they fumbled. I'll be honest with you. I think they fumbled Apocalypse in this season. He wasn't as scary as Bastion. Bastion was terrifying. Bastion was so terrifying in X-Men 97 season 1, and Apocalypse had all the potential, but they never really paid it off. Hopefully they bring him back and we get a redo on Apocalypse, because they didn't really, like, after he atomized at Magneto, there was really nothing else there for him aside from him taking over Gambit's body and maximizing Gambit's abilities. Okay, so there's a couple of different ones that I really really enjoy. I think Nightcrawler has a lot of fans, and it's rightfully so, because they really capture who Nightcrawler is in the comic books, where he's just like this super selfless version. They did do some stuff with Scott, with Cyclops, where he was more comic accurate than he was in the original X-Men animated series. Because the reality is the comic book version of Cyclops is a lot closer to he is a mix between the movie version of Wolverine's attitude and the by any means necessary attitude of Magneto. The Scott the Cyclops in the comic books is absolute, like, you got to remember, he's a child soldier. He's about, I'm protect all mutants or whatever. I'm off of Professor X's dream. We protecting these mutants here. And Cyclops will absolutely wreck shit. Like, he's not the same person that they've had in the movies, where he's kind of the Boy Scout. He is a Boy Scout in the sense that he's always prepared. He's always prepared to bring an ass whooping to you. I think the character arc was Rogue was really done well. I'm waiting for them to get Professor X right. I'm tired of him whining all the time. Like, I need him to boss up a little bit. Magneto was interesting. I think they did some interesting stuff. Um, if I had to pick one, it's probably Nightcrawler. Um, the stuff with Storm started well, but I mean, they kind of made her play the rear. Cable was actually legit. Cable was pretty close to how I remember him. Yeah. Comic accurate Cyclops is a problem. He is really aligned with, I'm going to protect my people, and if you get in the way, I'm not going to kill you, but if you just happen to die along the way, then that's just what happens. That's how Cyclops is. He really has kind of this Moon Knight edge to him. Like, I'm not trying to end you, but if it happens in the process of me doing what I need to do, sorry. He's more locked in than anything else. The movie version and the original X-Men 97 version, they had to have him play, "Hey Maddie, what's going on?" Yeah, Xavier's whiny in the animated series. I don't like him. He cries too much. Um, he cries too much, and then the comic book, Xavier was kind of an ass. Like, he was kind of an ass. Um, I don't know. They got to do something to make him a little bit more likable next season. Like, we got to do something about that. But yeah. So yeah, I thought that Bastion was delivered better than Apocalypse, and that's just me being 100% honest. I wish they would have done more with Apocalypse. All right, I'm skipping around a little bit because I had an entire part that I wrote out this morning talking about explaining, and I may save that for another video. Um, explaining the differences between X-Men 97 and the comic books, specifically the arc where, with the 12, where Gambit where Gambit, or no, I think it's the Blood of Apocalypse, where Gambit voluntarily um ends up going undercover and then ends up becoming brainwashed and becoming Death, Apocalypse Horseman. So X-Men 97 was good, and it did do some really interesting spins on some of the books. Even the Fatal Attraction arc was really, really, really rushed. Um, where I think it might have been in season one. I might be conflating the two things, um, or not. I don't know. But now I'm trying to remember. Was Fatal Attraction season one or season two? Help me out. Um, but the entire thing where Magneto rips the adamantium off Wolverine and stuff, um, I don't like how they paid that off. I really don't. I think it was this weird manipulative version of Wolverine that tricked one of his best friends into a suicide mission, essentially, and that's not in character either in the comic book or on the show, because Morph was his day one. X is easy to write. The way other news talk about him, just write that character. Well, and the thing is, Professor X is kind of a creep. Um, and he's trying to be this paternal figure to the X-Men, but he hides a lot. He has a lot of secrets. He manipulates them kind of behind the scenes. Um, they're put in this weird layer when he's in love with Jean Grey and she was like a teenager. That piece, I think that was just some writer really just saying, "I'm gonna throw this in here to fuck everybody up." I don't like that piece of it, but um, he was ineffective in a degree because he was too aligned. And I think one of the most interesting things in the Krakoa era that did come out, and it might have been Storm confronting him. Um, could have been Storm, might have been Apocalypse confronting Professor X on it. Um, basically, she said he's a good man who wants to do the right thing and save everybody. Unfortunately, and it might have been Destiny that said this. Um, now I'm trying to attribute the quote, but basically the long story short was Professor X wants to be the hero and he wants to save everybody, and in the process of trying to save everybody, he's going to sacrifice all the mutants. And that's what happened as they started reaching the conclusion of the Krakoa era. The entire Myra McTaggart thing, where all of a sudden she's a villain, and Professor X is having this ethical dilemma about whether he's going to go back in the past and kill her before a mutant ability takes over, was wild. That was wild, and it just came out of left field. And I think they had reached a point where they were just kind of spitballing towards the end of the Krakoa era with X-Men, just because they extended it way past what Bendis had envisioned. Very 60 men's writing women. That is true. But this revelation about him falling in love with Jean Grey actually came out, I think, in the 2000s. And I think that was a spin. It was kind of a jab at the time and everything. It was just a weird thing. It was a weird wrinkle to add into his character. And it was weird because also I think that was also in the Ultimate version of X-Men too. There was an element where that was in there. And if you haven't read any of Ultimate X-Men, especially the ones that Mark Miller wrote, don't. There's no reason for you to ever read Ultimate X-Men. None. Mark Miller's take on the Ultimate Universe was one of the grossest things. Like, it was consistently gross and weird. The entire, okay, if you want to know where Mark Miller's mind is, when he wrote the Ultimates and did the Ultimate version of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, they were in a relationship. They were still twins, but they were in a sexual relationship. Really weird shit. Wolverine was like this creepy, almost like Wolverine was an absolute creep in that movie, in that show, in that universe. The X-Men were just, it was awful. Don't put money in Mark Miller's pockets ever for anything. Yeah, the Ultimates was really cringy. Now, I say that to say this. They since have redone the Ultimates a couple of different times. The most recent version of the Ultimate Universe was awesome. It was incredible. And they just ended it, but it was really good. Where the Maker went, and basically the Maker is the evil Reed Richards, and he basically tried to recreate the Ultimates universe that got destroyed by Galactus. He tried to, or an incursion, one of the two, and he basically tried to recreate his version of the Ultimate Universe, but he had gone back and like manipulated the time stream, so Thor never gets the hammer. Captain America doesn't get discovered until later. Tony Stark never becomes Iron Man. Peter Parker never becomes Spider-Man. And through each time he changed it, they found a way to actually bring these heroes back. Except now, like when Peter Parker finally got bitten by the radioactive spider, they had these things called origin boxes where it had the radioactive spider in it. Tony Stark figured it out somehow. It gave Spider-Man his powers, but now Spider-Man is learning how to be Spider-Man as a married man with 2 kids. Aunt May died, Uncle Ben survived. And so Uncle Ben and J. Jonah Jameson are working together as a newspaper. It was real. The new version of Ultimate Spider-Man is incredible. The new version of the Ultimates was really incredible. It really did a lot to remove the taste of that 2000s era Ultimates right out of your mouth. Wolverine. Okay, so I'm getting to that. Hold on a second. Wolverine doing romance is always creepy. He's over 200 years old, right? Yeah, but where is he going to find somebody? Like, it'll be him and Mystique, and that's about it. Otherwise, he's got to hang around in Asgard. So, Maddie, I'm gonna let you down again. I haven't been able to watch anything. I broke my tooth last week, and I have been out of it. I am just now getting back into the swing of things. I broke a tooth and had to go and have it removed. It was one of my wisdom teeth, and it cracked last week, and so I had to go have that removed on about a day's notice. It last week sucked. That's why I'm not doing politics. Last week was so incredibly draining. I don't want to do any political stuff that's not tied to comic books. Yeah, I did a little thing. I tried to notify the community and everything, notify Twitch at least. I was out of it last week. It sucked. Yes, I have. I have it saved on my phone. It was awesome. I even have the when the punch connected, like it's like still almost looks like a Renaissance painting. It was awesome. I can always if we could find how to put some money up for Minnesota Spider-Man, it would be even better. He punched. Yeah, they released his picture, and he punched, was it Jake Lang or whatever, that weird psycho, like the antithesis, like he's a white supremacist who is the antithesis of white supremacy. He is dumb. Um, he's a funny looking little dude. Um, like he is antithetical to the thing that he supports, which I just find the universe has this weird way of making things ironic. And it was just he is walking irony. William Love. Awesome. I saw that trending. I'm like, why is Spider-Man jumping up on the truck, putting hands on people? Like, it was Jake. Oh, I need to see this in slow motion. I've watched that video at least 40 different times from all the different angles. Mystique. Oh, that's another one. So Mystique is awesome, but awful super evil. Remember when she got her daughter's fiance? Let's not talk about that though. Mystique has always been kind of her own thing. And in recent years, she has been the most hard line of the hard line when it comes to mutants. Um, she will assassinate anybody. She'll take anybody down. She will pretty much do anything to anybody just to preserve. One thing, she doesn't play about her wife. She doesn't play about Destiny. Um, but she also doesn't play about mutants, and she doesn't play about Rogue. She doesn't really care about Nightcrawler, which is kind of depressing. She doesn't care about Nightcrawler at all, but she doesn't play about Rogue. So my problem with like it, so I'm kind of jumping into uh more X-Men related stuff. We're talking about the Krakoa era. Um one of the X-Men is one of the earliest comic books I followed. Back in the days when you can have comic books, you can subscribe to a comic book, have it come to your house. X-Men was that comic book that I had. Um Around the Jim Lee, when Jim Lee and Chris Claremont came back and rebooted the whole thing, I think is after the death of the X-Men with the Siege Perilous and all that stuff. Okay. Sorry, sarcasm doesn't always translate. They're being emotive. Well, Mystique is kind of evil though. She is evil, but evil for the good, for the right reasons. She is evil for the right reasons. She's the reason why we have Mr. Sinister, according to the Krakoa era of comic books. Um, and okay, so the whole thing with Mr. Sinister, there's a whole nother layer. There's a whole nother layer to um what Mr. Sinister was in the X-Men Krakoa era, because that was a whole nother subplot that was going on where it was the X-Men at war with um the machines and with human beings, and um Mr. Sinister trying to basically merge with the cosmos and become his own dominion, where they had this entire thing of what a dominion was laid out, and they kept saying it and kept saying it like it made sense, and is this really 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 like high level kind of concept thing where basically he amasses so much intelligence that he ends up becoming his own um cosmic being, and it was wild. And it didn't make a ton of sense, and I feel like it was a complete and total ass pull towards the towards the end of the Krakoa era, and it was the only way they tried to make Sins of Sinister work, where he elevates to a dominion, and they introduced characters that aren't around anymore. They had the different versions of Mr. Sinister. Um, the female version of Mr. Sinister. They all had different the original Mr. Sinister has the heart on his head, I believe, and each one of them has a different suit of cards on their head. They made Gambit the spirit of variance or something. It was so fucking weird. And it started feeling ass pulley. Like, we're just gonna go into this next level thing. We're gonna blow their minds, and really, it just muddled the entire series. So I started X-Men during the Claremont era. And had that I was actually following it by having it delivered to my house, having it mailed to my house. I subscribed to X-Men. It would come every single month like clockwork. Had a new copy of X-Men in the mailbox. And when that subscription, when we ran out of money, because we didn't have a lot of money, when we couldn't afford the subscription, my mom would just take me to the comic book shop every couple of months and let me catch up on all the X-Men books. So X-Men was one of those books that I followed since I was little, since I started collecting. Um, and so my big problem with X-Men right now, the current iteration of X-Men, is it's completely and utterly directionless. It has no direction after the Krakoa era. We're in the From the Ashes era where they're supposed to be rebuilding. There's some good stuff happening. There's some really interesting stuff, but overall, Tom Brevoort, this is a clusterfuck. It's bad, and a lot of it feels like Tom Brevoort's trying to redo the Krakoa era in some weird way because he wasn't involved in it, and it's not great. I really wish they would have just turned the whole thing over to Gail Simone and let her just run wild with her universe building. Like, I really wish Gail Simone would have had it. Would have brought in Evel Ewing. They would have done some really interesting stuff with it. Brevoort is really, like, I don't know what he's trying to do, because the Phoenix Force just hops around. It's like this super powered STD where just people just catch it in the Marvel universe. Turned off their brain in that universe. Yeah, I do too. But yeah, overall, it just feels like this directionless heap of comic books, and it's really, really hard to follow. Like, I've been trying. There's so many X-Men books right now, and none of them really tied to one another right now. And the most coherent one is basically the Gail Simone book, where they're essentially doing the New Mutants, except it's Wolverine, Gambit, and Rogue as kind of the headmasters, and they're trying to do the New Mutants. Um, that's the most coherent one, and even then, it has its own stumbles. NYX, I have no idea. I have no idea what the fuck that was. Like, I still don't understand what exactly really happened in NYX. Um, it just was a thing that happened. It's too many. It's too many disjointed X-Men books. Like, either everyone has its own storyline and then they occasionally cross over, or they're all integrated and they cross over with each other frequently. But you can't do this sometimey kind of stuff where they're kind of related but not really, because it worked when you had X-Force, Excalibur, X Factor. They were all doing different things. They were all fighting different pools of enemies, and they all had their own rogues gallery and their own missions that they were doing and stuff, and it worked back then. It's not working now, and every team can't be the X-Men. I'm sorry, but every team can't be. There's the exceptional X-Men, which I think it was Evel Ewing did that one. That was kind of a limited run. That one was interesting. There was some good stuff that happened in that. I like the X-Men where it's Gambit and Rogue and a bunch of young mutants that they're training. That one's interesting. That one's taking place in New Orleans, and they're doing a lot of really interesting cultural stuff with some of the cultural, some of the cultural aspects of New Orleans, which is really interesting. But then there's also L, where she introduced this character named Mutina. I still don't. Mutina's been in there for over a year. I still don't know what the hell Mutina actually does. Like, for a while, she was this villain that was powerful enough to screw with the whole team. And now it's like, what are her powers? Well, she can hide in the shadows, I think. I don't know. It just feels like one of those kind of characters they just said, it sounds cool, it's probably a cool design, and they just ran with it. Death's Dream is another one where Death's Dream's an awesome looking character. In the Gail Simone run, I still don't really quite understand his powers. His mutant powers have something to do with control over dead things, I think. Calico, she has a fire horse, like a telekinetic psionic fire horse. I don't know what the Fire Horse does, and I don't really know what her powers are, but she has a psychic connection to her Fire Horse, and then there's Jitter and stuff. Jitter and Ransom makes sense, but anyway, long story short, I like what Gail Simone's doing. I was always been a big mark for Gail Simone. I always like Gail Simone's writing, and so I kind of gravitate towards anything that she does, and that might be just a personal bias. I think they should have just handed her the X room and let her run the whole damn thing. This is my take. Ruin their reputations of a lot of heroes. Spider-Verse is going to be hard to beat. The MCU, what MCU did, more or less, there's one specific way that they ruined characters, and it wasn't even clearly MCU. It's more like Fox X-Men. The damage they did to Cyclops and Wolverine just really frustrates me, because they basically made Wolverine, and it's something that did happen in the comic books too. Just because he was the breakout character, he's one of the most popular characters. They made him the main character of everything related to X-Men, and then all of a sudden, here's Wolverine chilling with the Fantastic Four, and he's kicking it with the Avengers, and you know, now he's off on his own doing his own thing randomly, weirdly. While in the X-Men books, he's fighting this thing. They made Wolverine the main character of the Fox Marvel movies, and it was kind of a detriment to the character, because it's like he shouldn't be able to do everything. It did wonders for Deadpool, because Deadpool, a character like Deadpool screams to have a movie. Like he's one of those characters that you just have to have a movie about him and see him in real life. But yeah, Wolverine, when he became the main character of the X-Men, it stopped becoming interesting for me, because he's in everything. And nobody can ever beat Wolverine. Wolverine can't ever be stopped by anything. Even was it the X-Men 3, that terrible X3 movie? Who's the one that dealt the final blow to Dark Phoenix? Oh, it was Wolverine. Anyway. So it feels directionless. A lot of it is because Krakoa overstayed its welcome, because Marvel interfered with what Bendis's original plan was and made Krakoa last years. It was literal years. Krakoa went on for years, and every year that it went on, it started losing its sense of focus and proportion. I thought that they could have done something really interesting with Nimrod. They tried. They established Nimrod as like when he crashed the Hellfire Gala and murdered all of those mutants. My God, you're like, oh shit, look at Nimrod go. Like he damn near killed Iceman, and that's not even something that's supposed to be possible. He found a way to do it. You're like, oh man, Nimrod's gonna be a problem. And then it just kind of well, how are we gonna address Nimrod? Well, we got Tony Stark over here, and Tony Stark is gonna do something, and then Storm and Magneto are gonna come clutch it out for us. Would you be okay with them? Yes, there needs to be a reboot. I want them to reboot. If we're talking about the comic books, there needs to be a Claremont Jim Lee kind of reboot, where they consolidate, and that's what I think they should do. Like one universe that branches out, and like one universe that branches out a bunch. So this is how I would do it. And so now we're jumping ahead. You got me jumping ahead in my outline, but I'm cool with that, because I can jump back. Because I do need to talk about Age of Revelation. That needs to be discussed, because that was cheeks, and we need to discuss that. The problem isn't all the multiple X-Men books. It's always been kind of fragmented with all the different X teams. Those books really gave those characters room to have stories. Excalibur had Shadowcat, it had Nightcrawler, it had Rachel Summers doing stuff that they couldn't necessarily develop in the regular X books. The difference is those books felt like they were splintering from something. In 1991, we had when Jim Lee and Claremont came back, it was blue, X-Men Gold. Cyclops was blue, the head of the blue team. Storm was gold. Different rosters, different books, but they were still one organization that branched out and handled different threats. I think that's what we lost. There is no center to the X-Men. There's some up in Alaska. There's some down in there's a team up in Alaska. There's a team down in Louisiana. There's a team in New York. They're just kind of all over, and they're all doing different things, and none of it really is that compelling. Okay. And I'm a little bit behind because it's hard to keep up with. Okay. I can be current on some of the properties of the X-Men, which happens. Like when they did Age of Revelation, which was really the only really super interesting book was Cloak and Dagger. Cloak and Dagger was amazing. I think it was Justina Ireland who wrote that one. Cloak and Dagger was awesome. It was an awesome little spin-off that happened during absolute shit run of Age of Revelation. But I do think that they need to bring it back to one center, and I'll explain how I would do it. Yeah, you need a new timeline. This is how I would do it. The center cannot hold. I'm fine with them splintering off, but there has to be some kind of heartbeat to there has to be some kind of heartbeat to it. This is what I would do. And because right now there's a 3K and the chairman. The chairman is Evil Beast. There's a whole story about how the chairman is actually Evil Beast. There's a whole sub story and who done it in Age Revelation that never really paid off at all. And so the way I would do it is I would have this big, huge campus. I would go back a little. I would actually take it back to the mansion, except we're going to expand the mansion to make it an entire campus. Okay. We're going to bring in Tony Stark. We're going to bring in Fantastic Four. We're going to have them do the security on this because the one consistent is the School for Gifted Youngsters has always been the target of attack. And so we're going to give it one of the most high-tech security grids ever. Okay. We're going to have all these kids and all these younger X-Men characters that they've introduced. They're all going to be in there. Okay. But the way we're going to do it is this is the psionic house. This is the telekinetic house. This is the feral mutant house. The feral mutants are going to be like Wolverine, Wolfsbane. The ones that are more animalistic. We're going to have the weather manipulation house, the elemental house, and all these mutants are going to live in these different little subgroups. Are going to train together, and there's going to be mixing. They're going to train together. You're going to have Storm running the elemental group. Wolverine and Laura Kinney can probably be the head of the elemental group. Have one where it's powers that are devastating but uncontrollable. Let Cyclops be the teacher on that one. Jean Grey can be the teacher on the telekinetic. Emma Frost can be the psionic telepathic. Maybe Quentin Quire can help out with that one. What I'm saying is we take all these different categories of mutants and actually split them up into different houses, because what's happening, one of the interesting things that they've done in Justice League, about a year ago, they brought all the members of the Justice League, put them on the satellite. And the way that they have it is when they had a threat to take care of, Martian Manhunter would determine who the teams were, and each team would be specified to neutralize that specific threat for their specific powers and abilities. So you didn't have the entire Justice League every single time. And you got a chance to actually learn and start liking some of those characters. And as with any good DC property, as soon as you have something that's really, really good, they're going to kill it. That's what happened with DCKO. They destroyed that. But it was really interesting the way, because then you can get different mixes of teams, get different personalities, different ways heroes work together. You can do pretty much the same premise with the X-Men. We have a threat that's coming up. We need Emma tell us from the psionic house who will be best for this mission. Storm, who's the best for the elemental house. Cyclops, who's the best for destructive powers. And that's how we put together teams. That you could have relationships, you can have intrigue, you can have rivalries, you can do all the things that made X-Men books work. Right. It's Hogwarts, but X-Men was doing that before Harry Potter came out. They were actually kind of doing that, whereas more like a school. Like the 90s X-Men books were kind of like a school. The New Mutants was definitely like a school. Is Hogwarts without all the weird shit from J.K. Rowling. I would take it. I'd do it. Because X-Men has always been about young people. It's always been a youth, a youth drama kind of book. Like that was what it was. The intrigue of these young characters, except Wolverine was like 500 years old, but these other teenagers and the way they interact with each other and growing up with each other and stuff. It's official story. Yeah, but Spider-Man, the Spider-Man's doing great in everywhere except the comic books. Spider-Man comic books have been almost unreadable uh up until recently. Spider-Man comic books, and Spider-Man is one of my favorite characters. I hate to say it, but Spider-Man comic books have been nearly unreadable. Um before I get too far into it, I do like I'm rocking the 80s tea thing. Like one of these days, if I could ever have some money off of this, I would love to do some kind of affiliate thing with 80s tea, because 80s teas, because I buy a lot of their stuff. And I always have something from one of them on there, like this Storm shirt. I love this Storm shirt. I got it last summer. Yeah, your Gryffindor house, except it's the Elemental house, the Psionic house, and stuff like that, where you can divvy up teams. And if you're going to do missions, you can say who's the best person for this. They train together. There's relationships, rivalries, all that other stuff. They should make more Justice League Dark. I agree. I think the problem with Justice League Dark is everybody ends up dying at the end. The school is always a school, right? Is a heavy metaphor for anti-race. Is this a heavy metaphor for, yes? You can play around with it. You can have mutants that are biased against other mutants. You can have, you know, like where we're actually addressing a lot of the stuff you would find on a normal college campus. A lot of the polarization you would find on a normal college campus, you can reflect it there. Some of the conversations that happen, except put a mutant spin on it. You just need to make sure that you have people that have the cultural cachet to pull it off as a writing team. I think it can absolutely happen. More Justice League Dark. Constantine being a giant weenie. The great thing about Constantine is he's always a giant weenie. No matter what iteration you put him in, he is the biggest asshole in the room, bar none. Every interpretation of him is fantastic. He is the most consistent character in DC. He's consistently a despicable asshole, and I love it for him. Uh, he's a manipulative asshole. John Constantine condemned a little girl to hell. Like he condemned a child to hell. He always feels the guilt. He feels the guilties about it, but he did do that thing. Like John Constantine in Swamp Thing and in Hellblazer was a wild boy. He was a wild boy. And I'm not as up to date on my Hellblazer. I have not read that in over a decade. But John Constantine in Hellblazer was a wild boy. It does make him, but see, that was kind of the thing where he is this self-serving, like he's heroic, but he's also self-serving at the end of the day. And at the end of the day, what'll happen is his conscience will get him to kind of do the right thing and hedge on doing the right thing, even though it's for the wrong reasons. Old Man Constantine series. Make sure you write that down. Because if somebody from DC steals that one, that's $1 million idea. Old Man Constantine at the end of the universe, sitting there talking to the cosmic abstracts and negotiating. Oh, it'll be awesome. They need more Ghost Rider stuff. They need to figure out what they're going to do with Ghost Rider. I like the last Ghost Rider. Reyes, I think that's what his name was, the one who had the car. That was an interesting one. That Cosmic Ghost Rider was basically an alternative version of Frank Castle. And it was Frank Castle with like this really like the driest humor that you've ever seen. Like he was Frank Castle, but funny with this really, really fucked up sense of humor. Cosmic Ghost Rider was kind of awesome. So you have like Spider-Man. Okay, so you've just named most of the members of the new Fantastic Four. Spider-Man, Hulk, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and there was one more that was missing. One person was missing. Who was the person who's missing from the new Fantastic Four? Because there was a book like they had like they had a book. It was the new Fantastic Four. Yeah, it was Hulk, Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Ghost Rider. And it was Gray Hulk. So it was the constantly the sarcastic, irritated, kind of over it, world weary Hulk that was an enforcer in Vegas. Spider-Man and Wolverine and Ghost Rider. It was an awesome little series. I enjoyed when they did that team up, because Wolverine and the Hulk really they have this love hate relationship, and most of the time it's just them bickering with each other. I was waiting for it when Wands was aging in real time. Nobody else was. I haven't. I planned on seeing it last week, and then last weekend I wanted to see it, and I broke my tooth. That was it. Like even if I saw it, I wouldn't have remembered what happened. Those are the biggest properties. So the biggest properties, the and so and I'll put this out here because I saw a lot of people had this misconstrued. Um, before the Iron Man movie, before Iron Man, before that kind of launched the MCU, nobody was reading Iron Man books. Nobody's Avengers. Nobody was really reading Avengers books. The biggest properties in Marvel were X-Men and Spider-Man. Those were those were the main. Those carried Marvel all those years. Everything else was niche. Nobody's really reading Fantastic Four like that. The biggest selling books were X-Men and Spider-Man books most consistently. And that's why they got so many different arcs and so many different crossovers. Because everybody in 80s, 90s, through the speculator boom and all the other stuff. From Marvel, it was Spider-Man and X-Men carrying the entire label. They carried the entire label. And then the Iron Man movie came out, and then all of a sudden, Tony Stark jumps from being kind of a because he was always an A tier to me, but in the grand scheme of things, he was kind of this B tier character, and he went to being the main guy in the Marvel universe. You're the third streamer. There must be something going around. Warn the other people. Warn everybody else. Be careful. Don't be careful what you eat. You might break a tooth. Yeah, Iron Man wasn't really that important. I loved him. I had Iron Wars. One of the things when I was a kid, my mom would always try to find comic books with black characters on it, and so um, when when uh when James Rhodes took over and they had the Black Iron Man, I had those, and that's how I got into Iron Man. Like I had the old Avengers series, but Iron Man was just a character in those books. The standalone Iron Man, that's what got me into Iron Man. Uh, because I had the one where the Mandarin finds out that Iron Man is black. This is I think right after the Demon in the Bottle story, which was kind of a seminal story, where Tony Stark's alcoholism cost him everything, which is amazing. They actually did a version of the Demon in the Bottle. I think they did that in Iron Man 2, the movie Iron Man 2. That was kind of a homage to that one. But yeah, but Iron Man was not a main character. It was kind of a flyer that they actually made a movie about him, and it took off because he's an interesting character. There's a lot there. It's a cool character, and it does beg to be put on the screen, but he was not a major character. He was a participant in the Avengers. He had his own solo series off and on. Um, like I said, the Iron Wars series was really good. But and I read his books, but other people weren't. It's like Daredevil. Daredevil was kind of this niche hero for a while. But it was Spider-Man and X-Men that carried pretty much Marvel. And anything else is not necessarily true. People were reading the Avengers, people were reading Iron Man books, just like people were reading Power Man and Iron Fist books in the early 80s. They weren't like huge. They were things that happened, but Spider-Man was the moneymaker. X-Men was the moneymaker because X-Men had a lot of that. It had a lot of teenage relational drama in it too. Yeah, and I think that was probably a good call. Because I mean, RDJ almost destroyed himself. His addiction almost killed him. And that's why when they cast him, I'm like, he's the perfect Tony Stark. He's perfect. He is Tony Stark. It's probably one of the best castings that Marvel's ever made. Uh, yeah, Tony Stark was perfect. Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark was perfect all the way up until the addictive personality, because he even got components of his addictive personality without leaning 100% into the addiction side of things, because that could have sent him down a bad path. I get it. Um, but yeah, I think he was probably from a casting standpoint, probably the most perfect outside of Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. Um, Tony Stark, the casting of Tony Stark was absolutely dead on perfect, and that's what made the movie work. But yeah, he wasn't like this amazing. He wasn't like this super popular character before all this started. Ooh, all right. I think I've kind of reached the end of my talking, so let me power through the rest of this. Spider-Man is really him, and the thing that's really interesting about Spider-Man and the way he's presented is Spider-Man shows what happens when you have to deal with poverty growing up. um, because if Peter Parker had Tony Stark's resources growing up, Peter Parker would be on par with uh Tony Stark and Reed Richards. At least he would be considered in that echelon of intelligence. But he was all self-taught. He and I read something where they're talking about if you want to be impressed, look at how many different scientific disciplines Peter Parker had to master at the age of 15 just to make web shooters. Like there was all kinds of different propulsion and chemistry and all kinds of other stuff that he had to master as a teenager to make a web shooter. Like he had to invent new he had to almost invent new sciences to make the web shooters work. In the real world, he would have won a Nobel Prize for that. They would have done something like he invented something that has never been seen before. And so if you would have given Peter Parker Tony Stark's resources, it would have been amazing what he did. And it was really interesting when I think it was the Superior Spider-Man where uh Doc Ock actually took over Peter Parker's body and he realized what kind of genius he was and how smart. He also thought Spider-Man was dumb. When he took over Peter Parker's body and actually saw how intelligent he was actually mad that he was underachieving so much. That's went out and got it. I think he went out and got his master's degree. Ruffalo, who's almost wasted in the MCU. The reason, okay, and Sebastian Stan. There's a reason why Ruffalo's kind of wasted because Universal still holds the rights to the Hulk at the end of the day. And so he is super limited because there's no reason why we shouldn't have a standalone Hulk movie. The only reason we don't have one is because Universal, I think, still owns some of the rights to the Hulk, the Incredible Hulk. And Marvel hasn't been great when it comes to sharing the rights. Like you saw how long it took for Spider-Man to get in. The X-Men are just now coming into the MCU. And so yeah, they still own the rights to the Hulk. And so Ruffalo is kind of wasted as Banner right now, just because they can't do a heck of a whole lot with him except have him be a cameo in somebody else's movie. I love Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury because Nick Fury, when we talk about Tony Stark being a C-list character, um, Nick Fury was F-list. Like nobody really knew who Nick Fury was. To the point I remember when who was the guy from Knight Rider? David Hasselhoff. He was almost a tone perfect Nick Fury. And he was Nick Fury in something or other. And people are like, no, it's Samuel L. Jackson because everybody thinks Nick Fury is Samuel L. Jackson. It's a black guy. And Samuel L. Jackson, he owns that role. Yeah, he'd be like Doctor Doom without the ego. A bloodlusted Spider-Man is terrifying. A bloodlusted Spider-Man with no morals is an absolute terrifying thing to deal with. Oh man, you're gonna love the movie. Don't get popcorn. Yeah, I gotta stay away from popcorn for a while. He made Nick Fury black. There's a black Nick Fury in the comic books right now. Nick Fury Jr. The old Nick Fury, I think he had to replace the Watcher. They did something really interesting. with Original Sin, which was really kind of dope. They made Nick Fury the man on the wall. And so Nick Fury was the guy that was taking out all the extra dimensional and cosmic and eldritch threats before they hit Earth, but he was a soldier doing it. And so he would go out and assassinate, like if some eldritch monster escaped and it was outside of Doctor Strange notice, Nick Fury went out there and killed the guy. He would take out extra dimensional threats before they came and started messing with the Marvel universe. It was really kind of an awesome thing. And this whole convoluted story where Nick Fury ends up shooting the Watcher and killing the Watcher, and as punishment, the other Watchers basically said, "Okay, so you were the man on the wall. You were so actively involved in protecting this universe. So now your punishment for killing one of ours is we're going to grant you immortality, and you're forever destined to watch and never interfere again." It was kind of a sweet way to send him off. And then then Black Nick Fury showed up. Oh, well, yes. He's so much better than the franchise stuff. Hey, Samuel Jackson's the hardest working man. He's trying to get that paycheck. I've seen Samuel Jackson in some really weird things, but I'm like, he's trying to get that paycheck. I get it. I respect the hustle, bro. I get it. There's one he did with Tommyville. Sunset Limited. It's a Cormac McCarty. Never said the dude's name. Cormac McCarthy. It's a Cormac McCarthy book. Sunset Limited. If you ever get a chance, you want to see acting, it's Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel Jackson. They are the only characters in this. And it's a one room. They're all in one room. It's all dialogue driven acting. Do yourself a favor. Watch it if you want to see some real acting. It's based on a 2-character play. There's actually a comic book where Spider-Man stops holding back and Hulk was trying to make him calm down. There's one where Spider-Man actually was beating up Firelord, who's one of the Heralds of the Galactus too. And he was like bloodlusted and crazed. And Spider-Man defeated a cosmic entity because he had to. It was wild. But yeah, bloodlusted Spider-Man is an absolute terrifying thing to deal with. But yeah, Maddie, if you want to see Samuel Jackson act his ass off, watch Sunset Limited. He's got it in him, right? It was to me, it's one of the most and like I said, it's only 2 characters, it's only one scene, only one set. But yeah, Sunset Limited is probably one of my favorite things I've ever seen him in. And you go back and watch some of the old Spike Lee movies that he's been in, you get a chance to really see his acting chops too. I think he takes on project like I've seen him in some more independent movies. You just got to look for him because they're not big releases, but he gets a chance to kind of dabble in it. Where he can kind of take jobs that he wants. I love to see him do something recently. I think there was some kind of independent movie that he just did, if I'm not mistaken. And it was one of his passion projects. So, quick question, Maddie, have you seen Sunset? Have you watched Sunset Limited? Because that one's okay. Go watch Sunset. Like you will, I think you will enjoy it. Without getting into too many spoilers, Sunset Limited is basically it's a conversation between a non-believer and an atheist, not even a non-believer, an atheist. And I don't even think I would classify him as an atheist. I would just say he doesn't believe, and a born again Christian. One of the most compelling, interesting conversations I've ever heard. Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson absolutely own the screen. It's amazing. It's amazing. um, the trigger warning for self-harming and stuff, because that's one of the characters, and that's part of the main driving point of it. And it's the conversation basically talking about why life is worth living and whatnot. But acting, and it might scratch your itch to see him do something serious. Um, One of my favorite movies. I will sit there and watch it. And like I said, it's watching him and Tommy Lee Jones bounce off of each other. Really, really good stuff. So I think I got through my outline, and my tooth is like my mouth is like my jaw is tired. Because one of the things when you get your tooth pulled, when you get a tooth pulled, your jaw gets really tight. And this is the most I've been talking all today. I had a presentation I had to give earlier today, and um, I'm my face hurts. Like it's actually hurting. Um, so what I will do is I will actually, if you guys will watch it, I'll actually take my new how I would do the X-Men, because there's a lot of other layers I would add to it, um, and make a whole video out of it and see what happens. Because I used to do this thing called character issues, where I would take characters that I thought were being underutilized or misused, talk about what their issues are, and respin them. Um, I did one where I was talking about there's a character, Jason Todd's a character I don't like. I've never really liked Jason Todd, but I said I'm gonna take this character I don't like and figure out how to make him more palatable to me. And I did a whole thing where Jason Todd ends up actually becoming um, Amanda Waller's number two at Task Force X to redeem himself, but then also go and conduct the suicide missions that everybody else is scared to do. And it was kind of a redemption arc for how they reintroduced him as the Red Hood, and made him more interesting than how they had him. Okay, I'm hyped. I just gotta find we gotta find the time to go see Spider-Man. Like I said, I was gonna go see it, and then this tooth thing happened, and it just blew up all my plans for the weekend. So I'll try to catch that one. Try to track down Sunset Limited if you can, Maddie. It's an amazing it's an amazing it's not a short movie, but it's a bite-sized feature film. And it's worth every minute of that you invest in it. Um, my face hurts, y'all. I gotta get off of here. I will catch y'all next week. I'm actually setting up some gaming streams so that I can actually play some games and do and talk about some other stuff. Maybe the games will help me get into a mode to talk some political stuff, because there's a lot of flim flammery and chicanery going on. And I think the clock is ticking on. Um, I don't know how long we have, but I think when it happens, I think the president is probably going to do the Mitch McConnell thing, and we won't know about it for a while. So I have some opinions on that, but my face hurts. I got to get off of here. I will talk to y'all later. Thanks for tuning in. Uh, peace.